In 1944, a British soldier was ordered to stop a German tank. He had one weapon. To use it, he had to get within 50 yards of the tank before firing. 50 yards, the length of half a football pitch, close enough to hear the engine, close enough that if the crew spotted him first, he was dead before he pulled the trigger. The weapon in his hands was not a rocket launcher. It was not a bazooka. It was powered by a spring, the same basic principle as a medieval crossbow. To fire it, a soldier first had to compress 200 pounds of force with his own body, then get close enough that a vehicle weighing 57 tons and armed with a gun that could punch through 2 feet of concrete could not miss him if it turned his way. The British Army knew exactly what it was asking. They chose this weapon anyway. And the men who took it into the rubble of Normandy, into the mountains of Italy, into the streets of Holland, won more Victoria Crosses with it than with almost any other weapon of the entire war. Not because it was easy, because they were close enough that missing was not an option. To understand why the PIAT existed at all, you have to go back to the beaches of Dunkirk in May 1940, and what Britain left behind there. When the British Expeditionary Force evacuated from Dunkirk, they saved 338,000 men. What they did not save was their equipment. Guns, vehicles, ammunition, anti-tank weapons, nearly all of it was abandoned on the beaches or destroyed to keep it from German hands. Britain had pulled its army home, but the army that came home was an army stripped of almost everything it needed to fight. Among the most critical gaps was anti-tank capability. The standard British anti-tank rifle, the Boys, fired a .55 caliber round that could penetrate the armor of early German tanks. By 1940, German armor had improved to the point where the Boys was already becoming obsolete. Against the newer Panzer III and IV models, it was almost useless. Against the tanks Germany was developing for future operations, it would be completely ineffective. Britain needed something new, needed it immediately, and had almost no resources to develop it with. Into this crisis stepped 2 men working in circumstances that had no right to produce anything useful at all. Stuart McCrae was a journalist and amateur engineer who had been recruited into the Ministry of Supply's Weapons Development Branch, a unit called MD1, sometimes called Churchill's Toy Shop because of its direct line to the Prime Minister. Geoffrey Jeffress was a Royal Engineers officer with a gift for improvised weapon design. Together, working in a requisitioned country house with minimal budget, minimal staff, and minimal time, they were tasked with producing a workable infantry anti-tank weapon from almost nothing. The American bazooka used a rocket motor to propel its projectile. Simple, effective, but rocket propellant was in short supply in Britain in 1941, and the manufacturing infrastructure to produce it at scale did not exist. A different approach was needed. Jeffress designed a spigot mortar system. Instead of a rocket or a conventional gun barrel, the PIAT used a massive steel spring to launch a hollow charge bomb from a spigot, a central rod around which the bomb was placed. When the spring was released, it drove the spigot forward with enormous force, firing the bomb toward the target. The recoil of the firing also recocked the spring automatically for the next shot, in theory. Pause and think about why this was actually ingenious. A rocket launcher produces a backblast, a jet of flame and gas that erupts from the rear of the weapon when fired. This means a bazooka cannot be fired from inside a building, from a foxhole with a wall behind the firer, or from any enclosed space without potentially killing the person using it. The PIAT had no backblast at all. The spring mechanism produced no exhaust, no flame, no gas. A soldier could fire it from inside a building, from a slit trench, from behind a wall, from positions where a rocket launcher would have been useless or lethal. In the rubble of Normandy villages, in the cellars and doorways of Dutch towns, in the mountain positions of Italy, this was not a minor advantage. It was the difference between having a weapon and not having one. The hollow charge warhead was capable of penetrating over 100 millimeters of armor, enough to defeat any German tank it was likely to encounter if the shot struck the right place at the right angle. The problems were equally significant. The PIAT weighed 32 pounds unloaded. Carrying it across a battlefield was exhausting. The initial cocking of the spring, compressing 200 pounds of force to prepare the weapon for its first shot, required the soldier to lie on his back, brace the weapon against his feet, and haul the body of the weapon upward with both hands. Many soldiers, especially smaller or less powerful men, could not do it alone. Some could not do it at all. And if the weapon failed to recock automatically after firing, the whole process had to be repeated under fire, in the open, while a tank was aware of the soldier's position. The recoil when fired was savage. The spring releasing 200 pounds of force transmitted a violent shock back through the weapon into the firer's shoulder. Broken collarbones were reported. Soldiers who fired it without properly bracing themselves were sometimes knocked backward off their feet. The first time a man fired a PIAT in training, the experience was a shock that nobody who had not encountered it could quite prepare for. Let me put you in that position for a moment. It is June 13th, 1944, a week after D-Day. You are Sergeant Major Stanley Hollis, and you are in the village of Villers-Bocage in Normandy. 3 German Tiger tanks have appeared at the end of the street. A Tiger weighs 57 tons. Its front armor is 100 millimeters thick. Its 88 millimeter gun can destroy any Allied tank at ranges beyond a kilometer. You are 50 yards away. You have a PIAT. You have already cocked it, which took everything you had. The bomb is loaded. The tank crew has not seen you yet. You are pressed against a stone wall, weapon raised, watching the Tiger move slowly toward your position. You have 1 shot before they know where you are. After that first shot, if the tank does not stop, you will need to recock the weapon under the gaze of a tank crew who will have every reason to kill you. You fire. The recoil throws you back. The bomb hits the Tiger's side armor. It stops. The crew evacuates. The 2 tanks behind it, uncertain what just happened, pull back. You have just stopped 3 Tiger tanks with a spring-powered weapon from 50 yards. You will receive the Victoria Cross. That is not a hypothetical. That is what happened. But here is what most people never hear about the PIAT, and it reframes everything about the weapon. The soldiers who used it most effectively were not the ones who tried to use it from safe distances. They were the ones who understood that the PIAT's only real advantage was its lack of backblast, which meant it could be used from positions no other anti-tank weapon could occupy, and its hollow charge warhead, which was most effective at the closest possible range. The men who won Victoria Crosses with the PIAT were men who got closer than the manual said was necessary, because they understood that at 30 yards instead of 50, the margin for error disappeared entirely. The weapon punished distance. It rewarded courage. And in a war full of weapons that gave soldiers at least the illusion of fighting from safety, the PIAT stripped that illusion away completely. You knew exactly how close you had to be. You knew exactly what would happen if you missed, and you went anyway. Over 115,000 PIATs were produced between 1942 and 1945. They served in every theater where British and Commonwealth forces fought: North Africa, Italy, Normandy, the Netherlands, the Pacific. Multiple Victoria Crosses were awarded to soldiers who used them in circumstances that required getting closer to enemy armor than any reasonable assessment of survival would have suggested was possible. After the war, the PIAT was replaced by rocket-powered weapons. The spring mechanism was obsolete, but the hollow charge principle it used, the shaped explosive that concentrates force into a penetrating jet rather than a blast, became the basis of every modern anti-tank weapon that followed. The physics that Jeffress worked out in a country house in 1941 are still the physics inside every shoulder-launched anti-tank missile used by every army on Earth today. The men who carried the PIAT into battle knew what it demanded: 50 yards from a Tiger tank, a spring mechanism, and the understanding that if the first shot did not stop the vehicle, the second shot required them to still be there. Most of them were. The spring-powered weapon that everyone called primitive stopped the most advanced tanks Germany built, and the men who used it got close enough that it was never really a question of the weapon at all. It was always a question of the man holding it.